Now it is time for the bike season has kicked off in earnest, and yours truly did take a couple of rides out to a couple of demos. I have been debating all these demos again because the bikes really haven't changed that much. Kawasaki has brought out this Ninja 400. Kawasaki also has a Z650 and a Z900. It's actually not a bad looking bike. They had the BMW demo truck there, and I went on 3 rides, and it was a normal short kind of 10-minute, 15-minute ride that they normally have on the local demos, as opposed to the longer ones they have at like a Americade or Daytona Beach. Usually the bike store demos are not too long, 10 to 15 minutes, and this was a decent ride. And I rode the 2018 S1000RR, which is much like the 2017, probably the last 3 or 4 years. The bike hasn't changed much. But I did ride it again, and I rode the GS310, I believe it's called the 310R, which is a naked version of the 2-cylinder twin 300cc bike, I guess it is, that BMW came out with last year. And I also rode the S1000R again. I did not have a great experience riding the S1000R the first time when I rode it at Metuchen at Cross Country Cycles, because I think the one they pulled out for the demo there was a replacement for the one they had on the demo, which had some kind of mechanical problem, and the one they pulled out, they dropped one off the showroom floor and put it out on the demo, and that one wasn't broken in. I think that's one reason why I didn't rev as well and as I expected it to. And I suspect this may have been the case with the GSX S750 and 1100 that I rode last year, or 1000 I rode last year, where they also may not have been broken entirely and would not rev past 8K for the GSX 750S and really 6K for the GSS 1000. The S1000R that I first rode would not rev past 8K. It just hit that and just backed off. So, and also the brakes were super grabby. Literally 1 or 2 finger brakes. The ZX6R brakes that you just touch them and you're about ready to fly over the handlebars. So you have to be super careful with those brakes. But at least they won't lock up because they have ABS. So now I will say I didn't want to ride it again. Okay. Because I was so disappointed with that first ride. But the BMW rep they had there, not just the truck staff, but they also had a corporate rep there, said, hey, why don't you try it one more time, see what you think about it? And I said, all right, well, I guess it won't hurt to try it one more time. And one of the benefits of this particular demo in this particular route was that, unlike the Yamaha demo that I went on the day before at Hillside Cycles in Latrobe, this wasn't one of those winding, long demos on crappy Pennsylvania back roads that I knew I didn't want to ride a powerful bike on again, that had super touchy brakes, okay? Like the demo I did the day before that, which I'll get back into in a minute. And I demoed the MT-09 on that route. And I was thinking about demoing the R3 on that route. But due to a combination of things, I'll get to them in a minute, I ended up not doing that. So what I did was I took the S1000RR first because I wanted to get, again, a good feel of comparing the MT-09 and the MT-09 throttle, and which I rode in A mode in the demo, and throttle response and power response, everything, and gearing to the S1000RR seating position, handlebar position, gearing, throttle response, everything. And I ended up setting up the S1000RR in race mode. This is the thing I've realized lately. I can sit there and just blip the throttle off idle and get a good feel for how much slack there is in the response. And I like it with a tighter throttle that's much more responsive to just the slightest turn. I don't like having a big, large slop in the throttle, so I ended up just basically flipping through the modes, street, sport, and race, until I found the one that had the nicest response to the most normal response to my hand, and used that one. I just stuck it in sport mode to start with, because I didn't want to go full race the first time I rode it. And sort of while we were coming back at the last minute, while we were on the street section coming back straight back to the dealership, I went ahead and put it on race mode, and it felt a little bit tighter. It was a little bit fine. It was everything. And I talked to him about this, and he said, well, yeah, you shouldn't have a problem riding in race mode on the street. It's just, you're going to have a sharper response. I was like, okay, fine, no problem. But I didn't want to do that right off the bat when I started. And it was good. It has a little bit more slack than the MT-09 does in A mode. The big difference is the responsiveness is much slower than the MT-09 in A mode. The MT-09 in A mode is like immediate. You don't have to, it's not like you just barely twitch it and it jumps off. It's not quite that bad. But what does happen is it immediately responds to the change in throttle. So if you change it by like 5 degrees, you get a certain percentage of power as a response. If you change it at 10%, at 10 degrees, you get twice the power, as a response. You change it by 15 degrees, you get, 3 times the power as a response. It's not like that with the R. You can move the throttle, 10, 15, 20 degrees, and the engine will build power in a fairly linear manner, and it will make power. It's certainly capable of making power, but there's no immediate response, okay? It takes 2 or 3, maybe a second or so, and if you watch the tachometer, you can see the delay between what you do with your hand and what happens with the tach. And what I found was I could bounce my hand, I could turn my hand about twice the rate that the tach would move. So I go woo, woo, with my right hand to go one, wop, 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 and the tach would go vroom, 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 and in practice, that works, okay? The bike has plenty of power. You don't have to work it real hard. Absolutely, you can ride the bike at about 4,500, RPM in second or third gear, just cruise along, and it has enough torque. It'll drop down to 2,000 RPM, but you can still get it to go. And it has enough RPM. It will go up to 6 or 7 RPM, and it'll still run. And you don't need to really race the hell out of it. You don't need to really hit it hard. It always has enough power for at least street use. It will go very fast. It's just as casual as you can be. And the big difference between it and the MT-09 in that regard is, with the MT-09, you constantly have to keep the throttle under control. That bike will hop like a bunny the moment you make any significant throttle changes. They've gotten rid of the throttle surge, where at least now the slightest bit of twitch or bump or something on your hand does not cause it to jerk, forward, to surge forward and jerk back and stuff, okay? But it's still responsive enough where if you do change that throttle significantly, the bike will surge. It definitely will. It definitely has power that will come flying on your right hand. And a couple of times, 2 or 3 times, and maybe even one time, I almost threw myself on the back, even knowing this. And it was quite a bike to handle, riding up and down on these dusty, dirty, crap pothole, piles of dirt from dump trucks, up and down these vertical roads on these back roads around Greensboro. And I can tell you now, there's no question in my mind that bike is too much bike for a lot of people. It's not even all that fast. It's just very quick. It certainly has a lot of punch to it. But I think the gearing is a little bit short. It's certainly noticeably shorter than the RR, and probably even shorter than the R. And I think the R was a better overall compromise between power responsiveness and throttle responsiveness and control. I thought the R was probably the best of the 3. The S1000RR is nice, but you still have that kind of crouching tiger seating position, and and the wheelbase is very long, and this rear suspension is very stiff, and you hit a bump on that thing, it's like boom, you're hitting like, you know, a curb or something. But the R is not quite that taunt. It has, you know, obviously a much more upright position without being too upright like the MT-09, where you're maybe a little bit too upright. You still have to lean forward a little bit and put some weight on the bars in the R, and it absolutely would fly. This one would fly. There's no question. You turn that throttle, and it's the same kind of thing with the RR. You could set it up so it was responsive but not immediate. Okay, so you knew if you twisted the throttle, you were going to get so much power out of it. And what you could do is twist it to about 50% and then watch the power, you know, whoop, and then once it started getting anywhere near to the point where you started to worry, you just back off the throttle and it backs down. So it's really hard for the bike to get away from you because you're never behind it. Okay, the rider has to really be bad to get behind the power. On that bike, you're always ahead of the power. With the 9, it's fairly easy to get behind the power because all you have to do is turn the throttle and it's immediately you have that torque. Immediately. It comes on right away. There's no delay, no futzing, no mutzing. You twist the throttle, it immediately will give you the power. And if you're not careful, if you're not ready, you know, and holding on throttle bars, you're leaning forward a little bit, you don't have your feet set right, okay, that bike could throw you off the back very easily. I don't think the S1000RR would do that to you. What it's much more likely to do is get going too fast, okay, because it can go very fast, very quickly. And it's much more likely to lead a rider into riding it too fast and then getting into a situation where they got too much speed and not enough distance. And the 9, I don't think is going to do that because the rider is much more likely to back off the throttle before that happens because it is I won't say it's like, you know, a boost of torque, but it has a lot of torque and it will definitely run. And the rider is much more likely to just kind of back off of it first, than to run it into trouble. Now, I'm sure you, of course, if you giant testicles, you can always leave the throttle open and ride it into trouble, just like you could with any bike, really. But I think it's more likely to happen that you're going to ride into trouble with a bike that's not as scary to manage the acceleration, but can easily provide you with enough speed to get you into serious trouble. And all you need is somebody who overestimates their ability to ride fast, and they're going to be in a lot of trouble on that bike. But they're both fast. I think the R is a little bit better than the 9, and unfortunately, the S1000R is only slightly cheaper than the S1000RR, and the MT-09 is not cheap. It's still MSRP in about $9,000. They have the MT-7 now MSRP in about $8,500. I was like, I can't believe they're almost the same price. It's ridiculous, and there's the S6R, which is coming in about $8,500 too. The 7 might be like 8K. It's not a lot cheaper than the 9. I didn't ride the 7. I haven't ridden the 7 for years. I must admit that the 9 has changed significantly. Probably the 7 has changed also. Maybe the power band doesn't drop off like a cliff at 8,000 RPM like it did before. But I personally thought that the MT-07, when I first rode it, was about a decent 500. Not bad, but not great. A good backroads bike. A decent 500-ish kind of bike, okay? Like the FJ6R is, which is a decent backroads bike that can go fast on a highway, But it's not really like, a super bike like the S1000R is, with an upright seating position. And the MT-09 is, I think, knocking on the door to being a super bike, but maybe is held back by the gearing. And also there's a fair amount of vibration in the handlebars. So let me cut to the chase here. It's the 310 that was really the standout performer for this ride because it performed better than I expected it to, significantly better than I expected to. And I would say it was easily as fast, if not faster, than the KTM 390, without any of the funny crap. It had a reasonably decent dash, decent controls, decent bars, and it's certainly a better looking bike than the RC390. And and how much does it cost? MSRP $4,500. That's not bad. That's not bad. That bike as a BMW is going to sell very well into the Ninja market. No question. What I can't see is why anyone would buy an R3, okay? Because anyone who buys an R3 thinking that it's going to be holding its value compared to this GS310 is crazy. Okay? It's more expensive than the BMW. It's not, I don't think it performs as well. I don't think it has the power. I don't think it's all that great looking a bike. And then you've got the Suzuki GS250, which looks better and is slower and is right there with it at the same price. There's the Ninja that's there. Everybody, the Honda is there. Everybody has a 300 now in that market. Then Cowie came out with the 400, and it's like, I haven't ridden a Cowie 400. It's not like Cowie's running around with his demo truck anymore, and even when they do have demos now, they tend to demo the Z650 and the Z900 more than anything else. So, it's not like, you can run and hide from the fact that BMW has a good bike with a good performance level and a solid power band. It revs nicely. It really is happy to rev up past the 10K red line. It has power from 4K all the way up to the red line. It runs, there's no flat spots. There's no weak spots. It's a solid bike. The brakes are decent. If anything, I really fault it for is the brakes did seem to be very weakish. Okay, they weren't great brakes. Let's put it that way. Decent feel and all, but it wasn't like, it was something you were going to hit the brakes and worry about, slamming yourself forward over the handlebars. Not good brakes in terms of stopping power, but decent in terms of feel. Okay, it was a solid beginner bike. Okay, I would say that it would make the Ducati 696 look stupid. The 696 is decent, but it's not a $12,000 bike compared to this bike. It's in no way is it 2 to 3 times the price, 2 to 3 times the value of this bike. Even if it is, a 600, it's an air-cooled 650. It's just, it isn't that much better than this bike. And then there's the SV650 as always, and the Z650, which are both decent bikes. The Z650 is a vertical twin, and the SV650 is a V-twin. They are both decent bikes. This bike is not a lot slower than those two. It has very similar power characteristics, and it has the same goddamn forks that the S1000RR has. If one thing you notice very quickly about this, range of bikes, the F800, blah, 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 BMW use those forks on just about all their sport bikes. The same forks. Okay? And it's incredible to look at this $4,500 bike, and it has 46 millimeter forks, inverted forks, which is the same freaking forks. Maybe the internals are slightly different. It certainly doesn't have the semi-active suspension, and it certainly doesn't have the Brembo brakes, but it's not bad. It is not a bad bike at all. I think the BMW fans definitely have something to be excited about. You put some decent brakes in a bike, and you probably have a really decent, bike all around. Now, what I would say is it's Ducati that has the pressure, because every bike they make now looks overpriced, if nothing else, and borderline underperforming. Okay, from the 696, the Scrambler, blah, the 959 even, the Sport Tour version of the 959, which is the precursor for the V4. All these bikes, you're looking at bikes that are 10, 12, 15. The 959 is 19 now. I mean, the 1299 that they have all these 1299s left over. Then they have the V4 coming out, $25,000, $30,000 bikes. I don't see where those, not to mention the 1200, right? The 1200S and the 1200R, I literally don't see how those bikes are going to be selling for what Ducati wanted them for when they wanted $15,000, $16,000, $17,000, $18,000, $19,000 for those bikes. I see a lot of the R's, the 1200Rs that are marked off, older versions of the R's that are marked off and now selling for, 15, for what the 959 used to sell. And the 959 has moved up into the, $18,000, $19,000 range because there's nothing beyond it, except for the V4 now. If they stop making the 1299, they stop making the 1199, what is there between the 959 and the V4? Nothing. So you've got a $15,000 gap between those two bikes. So what did they do? Naturally, they made the 959 more expensive. There's a point where Ducati it's not a bad bike. There's no question that it's a decent bike, but it's not that good. It's just not that good. Those bikes are just not worth. There's no way the 959 with a standard fork, okay, is worth 20 grand. And a V-twin engine that only makes 150 horsepower, and doesn't make all that much torque, doesn't make all that much horsepower, it isn't worth 20 grand for that bike. Now, admittedly, and I will say that there's a compensation. The 959 has a lighter clutch than, say, the S1000RR, and the S1000R especially has a fairly significant clutch pull. It's a little off-putting, if you're not used to pulling your clutch in. But at the same time, the 959 is super easy to stall off the line. I see people stalling them all the time. It's a nice-looking bike. It sounds great and all that stuff, but it's only so good in a world full of $12,000 Gixxers and $12,000 R1s and $15,000 base model S1000RRs. It's not that good of a bike, okay, that it's worth 19. The only reason that bike would sell for that kind of price, would actually sell, is because it's a Ducati. Because some schmuck is going to say, I need a Ducati. I must have a Ducati. No, I can't have a garden variety BMW or Japanese, bike. I need to have a Ducati. And there are going to be people that say that. There's no doubt. There's going to be people who walk in there with their wallets, thick wallets, and they're at it. If it's more expensive, great. I like that. I'm going to buy the more expensive bike rather than the cheap bike. And that's fine. And I don't think it's all that great a bike. I'll be honest with you. I think that there's no real handling benefit in the 959 over the S1000RR. Probably not compared to the Suzuki, definitely compared to the R1, I doubt it. The 959 might have more torque at the low end, maybe, okay, but it runs out of breath quicker and is not much more than a middleweight, honestly, in terms of its performance. I mean, it's got power, but it's not like a true leader bike. It's definitely not a top of the line super sport leader bike. And now, at the same time, and I think there's a lot of talk about all this, I just want to say at the end of this, that the ride that we took when I was at Hillview, and it was a longer ride. It was about a 45-minute ride that we took, all running around. I didn't record it, but it was running around. It was a challenging enough ride that I felt like it was a challenge to ride it on the MT-09 in A mode. But I enjoyed riding it with the MT-09 in A mode. I enjoyed it because I didn't have to take turns real fast, and I could come out of turns and get the bike fairly straight, and it just whack the throttle and would roll the throttle, and it would just shoot down the road. It was just like shot out of a cannon, shoot down the road. So it was fun to ride it like that. Not having to take a lot of stress in the turns, get the bike around the turns, straighten it up and shoot it out down the road. A lot of fun. I didn't have to do that per se with the S1000R, and this is on a different road. One reason why. Very different road, not nearly so vertical, and certainly with the S1000R, I didn't have to do it either. But the R and the RR are obviously fast enough that you can just cruise around in one gear and just, you take your turns, you come out of the turns, you hit the throttle, and, race. It's just a question of how fast you want to go on the straights. What I didn't take was the same ride with the R3 because I did not want to take that long ride with the R3 that I took with the MT-09 I didn't want to ride on those same roads. I didn't want to ride up and down those hills because I didn't want to have to try to make up the cornering with a bike that had virtually no power, even though it proved to work fairly well, as long as your acceleration requirements were modest, decent, not minimal, but modest. It worked well with the 310. I just had no real desire to do it on those roads with the R3. So I backed out of that ride. And then, oddly enough, it's really funny how I backed out of the ride, got in my car, get ready to leave, and it started to pour. There was no 3 o'clock ride that day because it started to pour right there. And I can't tell you how many times I've ridden up to Greensboro just outside of Pittsburgh, and it's either rained while I was out there, or I got caught in the rain, or I was, or something. I have seen it rain there at least half the time I've been there, because half the time I've been there, the weather's been really nice one day, the next day it rains. It's a lot of water for the sun that you get, and I've been out there many, many times and seen it get wet. So I'm sorry, R3 fans. I did not actually take the R3 on that trip, but I still say the demo will be there, and there will be other R3 demos, and you can always go into an R3 dealer and demo the R3. I am sorry to say this. If you really want to try an R3, fine. If you really want to save gas on a bike, fine. But, and this is a serious but, okay, you'll never know how much fun it is to ride a bike with real power and real acceleration and real legs, real gearing, until you try a bike with real power, real acceleration, real gears, real legs that can scoot like crap away from a corner. Is as easy as pie to ride. You just twist the throttle a little bit and boom, it's gone. If you think that an R3 is enough power and you never get your butt on another bike that has real power, at least a 650, not to mention a 900. Now, if you do ride the 650 or the 900 and you think they have too much power, I could agree that they have too much power, but that doesn't mean that they have to be ridden to full power all the time either. There's a big difference. Now, if you say, well, I would never ride them to even a quarter of their potential, that's possible. I can see that too. But at the same time, show me how these other bikes are that much cheaper than an MT-09, not to mention an MT-7, okay, to be significant value compared to an MT-07 or MT-09. If we're talking about a $9,000 900, let's just say, and a 300 is $3,000, then yeah, I would look at any bike and say, well, it's hard to see how that bike is worth 3 times as much. The problem is they're not $3,000. They're $4,500, $5,000 even. The R3 is the more expensive of the 300s, okay? I do not see how I would spend $5,000 for an R3 when I could get an FZ8, FZ1, so many 650s, or an MT-09 or an FZ9 with ABS, with traction control for that same $5,000, okay? It doesn't make sense. What would make sense to me is trying to get that same R3 for $2,500 or $3,000 on the used market. You're going to save money. If your argument is that you don't want to spend the money to buy performance you don't need, then why would you want to buy a brand new bike when you don't need a brand new bike? Just get a used bike. That's the whole problem with that efficiency argument. Just get a used bike in decent condition, okay? Now, if you're worried about getting a ringer or a bad bike or something that's going to cost you money and basically be a waste of your money, that's the same problem everybody has. That's exactly the same problem that everybody has. Then you got to talk about buying a 650 for $5,000, versus a used MT-9 for, say, $5,000, or a used FC3 for, say, $2,500. Then the question is the fact that it's new worth the extra cost? What if you have problems with it anyway? then you just paid all that money for nothing, for no benefit. So you don't know. And the problem is you don't know until you buy the bike and you try it. What if you buy the bike and it's stolen? What if you buy the bike and, brand new bike, and not only is it stolen, or somebody, runs over it or wrecks it or rides off with it or fucks with it or something and just, knocks it over? What then? Then you got a brand new bike that someone else has wrecked for you, And this is the thing. That's why I think there's a lot of benefit in not spending a lot of money for a bike. But there's also, just as there's also a benefit in buying a bike that has more power than you need, even if you don't use it all, because you don't need to use it all, that's fine, but at least you can use enough. You never have to worry about having enough power, and that is off the table. It is without question. I have no question about this. The one thing I learned today, it is fun to have a bike that has more power than I need and not have to use it, okay? What I would worry about with a bike that does not have enough power is that I find myself racing it harder because it doesn't have enough power to do what I need. The 310 was not quite that bike on the roads we took, but we did not go riding it on the highway. We certainly did not go riding it up and down mountain highways, okay? And I don't know how it would work on a road that's fast, like a 75, 85 mile an hour road, especially up hills. But for local riding it in city streets and riding it in city traffic, up to 60 miles an hour, I think it was just fine. Now, maybe the R3 is fine for that too, but again, I don't think it's a decent enough looking bike to do that kind of stuff. I just don't like the way it looks, and I'm not really impressed with the power delivery. I mean, it's probably okay, but I'm not a big fan of the R3. Let's put it that way. The thing that really stands out like a sore thumb, though, is the 600s class, is the R6, which is now 14K again, okay? The ZX6R, which has always been 14K as long as I remember, and, the CBR 600, which, they had that marked down in the door at the dealer I was at today for about $8,500 for a 2016 CBR 600. Why would anybody buy those bikes that are geared too long, have no low-end power, very little mid-range power, and are very fast if you wind the fuck out of them, but you're very rarely going to wind the fuck out of them, and you have to work very hard to ride the hell out of them. Yeah, it's one of those bikes you can whack the throttle wide open, fairly safely and sit there and wait till the revs come up and the bike takes off. But is that really what you want? And do you want to pay $12,000 for that? That's the other question. And what about the riding position? That's not really what I want to do. Now, the other thing I would think is a big thing also is the seat is aside from the seating position, is really, what if I can get even better bike for less money? What if I can get an MT-09 for $9,000 instead of buying an R6 for $12,000? What then? Has anybody gone out and rode the MT-09? Can you buy track, body work for the MT-09? Why would I want to take my brand new R6 or R1 with its stock fairing, which is expensive as hell, out on the track? Why not put some garbage bodywork on it, and then you have the good bodywork sitting in a garage if you want to, put it back on or something and sell it. So there's a lot of thoughts that I had about motorcycling, but I think the main thought I had out of all this today was, I don't want to have to buy a bike that I have to ride for 50 to 100 miles to get to somewhere where I enjoy riding it. Okay? It's very nice to be able to just roll the thing out on the average street, the average local street, even if it's a stoplight to stoplight traffic and whatever, and enjoy riding the bike. That's one of the good things about these naked bikes with the good, low power band and good, power off idle, like the 9 and S1000R, and even R. I mean, there's a lot of good things about bikes that have a lot of decent power, which I still think includes the 310. You don't have to go slinging them through the canyons and taking corners at 45 degrees and stuff to enjoy riding them. They're fine to ride in a straight line, just wick the throttle, race down the street. They're fine for that. You don't have to go 100 miles an hour to have fun riding them. The thing that I think a lot of people who ride 600s have to admit is they don't have to ride them on the track to enjoy riding them, because they don't have so much power that they're difficult to ride on the street. And you can ride them on the street, and have fun riding them. And it's the leader bike people who buy these leader bikes who really have to consider, why am I spending $14,000, $15,000, Ducati, $18,000, $20,000, $25,000 to buy these bikes? Am I enjoying riding them? Am I enjoying riding them on local roads? Do I enjoy riding them on, a street with 3 lanes of traffic? And I think you can enjoy riding them if they have good power and good brakes and decent handling at, modest speeds. But you can't if they're uncomfortable, they're super hot, and you can't really even accelerate them because they're geared so long. And the riding position is just really bad. It's stretched out too far forward. I don't think you can really enjoy that stop and go traffic riding. And then that's the kind of ride where you do need to get on, I-80 or something and do 85 miles an hour to really enjoy the bike. And that's, I think, the real lesson I learned in this whole thing. There's a lot of ways and a lot of types of bikes that I can enjoy riding, okay? The one type that I don't enjoy riding is the R1 that I have to lie out on, that doesn't like to run under 40 miles an hour without having to use a clutch a lot. It's really heavy clutch. It's hot as hell, okay? Uncomfortable as hell. And it basically, you're just riding it so you can brag about riding it. That's it. And yeah, you can brag about it. It doesn't mean that you're going to enjoy it. Once you stop bragging to yourself and to everybody else, it's still you on that bike. And the Suzuki, where my head was bent over so far that I had to pull my head up to see down the road, and fairly often now and I would just hold my head as high as possible to look over the bottom of the area where the eye cut is. That was a nightmare. That was a 24-hour nightmare riding that bike, because anything less than 50 miles an hour, it was a pain because I had to work so hard to hold my head up. The R1, anything in the sun, slow was a pain because those underseat pipes got so fucking hot and burned my ass, literally burned my crotch, and I had to stretch so far out, and I'm basically on my hands and knees riding a bike. That was a pain. Those are probably the 2 worst bikes in terms of comfort that I've ever ridden. And I think that as long as I can avoid that, I'll be fine. The only question from there is a question of money. How much money do you want? How much money can you spend? What is comfortable and all that kind of stuff. But I think people agonize a little bit too much over the displacement. There's no doubt that faster bikes are fun to ride. There's no doubt that weak, slow bikes, relatively speaking, are a pain in the ass to ride because they're so weak and so slow. But there's also no doubt that some of the 300s, and certainly probably the 400, are fast enough, even though they're just 300s. And I would certainly say that there's some 650s out there also that are decent. I know there's some 800s and 700s also, and I know there's some 900s and leader bikes also. I don't think that the world really needs a 1300cc V-twin. I just don't see that, and I don't really see how, it needs to be a V4 versus an inline 4. I don't see that either. And I have no doubt, there's no question in my mind, I have no question whatsoever that the HP Race and the Super Ligera and all this kind of shit, that those bikes are not worth $25,000 and up. There's no way those bikes are worth it for anything resembling anything but top tier world superbike racing. Just, that is nothing but ego. And an H2, come on, seriously. A supercharged leader bike that weighs 500 pounds. Why do you need that? Seriously. In what area of life does that make sense? Nothing but street racing. And even then, it's probably not even that fast. I'm sure there are faster bikes out there like supercharged, S1000RRs and stuff that can beat it. Or supercharged boosters, turbocharged boosters, whatever. Seriously. there's a sickness that can catch a hold of motorcyclists because those big fast bikes are out there. They're out there. Just as there is a sickness that can catch hold of motorcyclists because most of the time you can't use more than a fraction of the power of some bikes. Now, and even that includes the MT-09, okay? But there are still times when you can use most of the power of these bikes. And people who ride these 300s and think that anything more is a waste of power and money are crazy. There still are good times, good, solid, responsible times where you can use, the power of a 900, certainly a 650, the power of a 900. And not having it, you don't have a choice. You just don't have a choice. You have to be happy with a fraction of that power. So it's crazy to say that you're happy with a fraction of the power, but I can't be even more happy with twice the power. That just doesn't make sense. It's telling me is that you think that you're happy with half the power is more happy than me happy with twice the power. It is not true. Believe me, it's not true at all. Okay? What I'm not happy with, and I admit this, is Busa power, especially in a Busa-sized bike, or ZX14R power, especially in a ZX14R sized bike, or 1299 power, especially in a 1299 cost bike. Okay? I'm not happy with a big, fat, long, 1400cc bike that costs $15,000, or a Busa that costs $12,000, or a 1299 or 1199, even if they're light, but they still cost $25,000. I'm not happy with that. I fully admit that there's no sense in buying a $25,000 street bike. No sense at all. But does that mean it makes sense to buy a $4,000 street bike? That is the open question. I certainly can see how it has a niche, but if you're not commuting on a motorcycle on a regular basis and you're only putting a leg over a bike on occasion just for fun and riding a wide variety of roads, do you really want to be limited to a bike that has only 40 horsepower and 20 foot-pounds of torque? I wouldn't want to have that limitation, because in the hour or 2 or 3 or 4 hours that I'm going to be riding, I am going to use more than 20 foot-pounds of torque as often as I can. Okay? As often as I can. I'm not going to ride a motorcycle just to ride it for 5 hours. And that's the issue. If the point of riding is to travel, to cover distance, I would much prefer to do so in my car as long as the roads are clear enough to the point where I can cover distances in my car as opposed to needing a motorcycle because I'm stuck in a traffic jam or something like that. Okay? But if I can do that ride in my car, I'm going to do it in my car at 30 miles to the gallon and pay 3 times as much for the gas rather than do it on a motorcycle, save some money on gas, and run a risk the entire time of getting caught in bad weather. On a bike that can barely accelerate for 6 hours makes no sense. The other thing is, obviously, in a car, I can carry more stuff and I can sit in my car and relax. I don't need to go find a bench or some crap like that. It's quieter, it's warmer, I have air conditioning, on a bike, you're exposed to the elements, not to mention, all the crap that can happen on the road. It's safer in a car. So the only problem, and the other thing is, your bike can get stolen or damaged or wrecked or something behind some crap. What's going to happen to you in a car? Maybe, you're sure you could get carjacked, but, maybe you can get robbed or something like that. But at least, you're in a car. You've got all that going for you. You can close the door and drive away if possible. So yeah, I'm sure you could talk about the pros and cons of travel by motorcycle versus travel by car, but I just think the longer the ride is, the longer I'm going, the more it makes sense to ride a car than it does a motorcycle. Absolutely, I see now the true benefit of having a bike that I enjoy riding short distances as much as long distances, that I enjoy riding at low speed as much as at high speed, because it doesn't make sense to buy something thinking off the top of your head you're only going to enjoy riding it for 25% of the time you ride it, and you're going to suffer 75% until you get to the point where you can enjoy riding the 25%. Then ride the 25%, hopefully enjoy that fully, and then suffer the 75% to get back to where you started. It just doesn't make sense. It makes no sense to do that. And I fully admit that motorcycles have an advantage in negotiating to stall traffic as long as you can lane split or, at least get away with it, But at the same time, I have seen some bumps and humps and crap and stuff on the road that would take a motorcycle down pretty easily. And in a car, the worst I'm going to worry about is having a flat tire, a bad wheel as a result. Okay? So to me, the benefits of having a car far outweigh the benefits of having a bike. I could say a car is almost a necessity, and it really does come down to the utility of the issue. For some people, a bike makes more sense than a car, and for some people, a car makes more sense than a bike. But at the same time, if a car is going to be slower than a bike already, okay, why buy a slow bike? You already have a slow car. Why buy? If you want to go slow, ride your car, okay? You want to save money on gas? Don't ride your car as far, Sure, I'm absolutely not saying it doesn't make sense to buy a cheap bike or a bike that gets great gas mileage and save gas, but that is assuming it makes sense to ride the bike in the first place. Okay? You'd be a fool to worry about saving gas to the point where you do something utterly dangerous and life-threatening, to do it, over saving $20 in gas. It doesn't make sense. Okay? It's foolish enough and risky enough and dangerous enough to ride a motorcycle as it is. You might as well enjoy as much as you possibly can within reason, And I say this, I mean this when I say this. Buy a bike that has at least as much power as you want, okay? Even if it's not as much power as possible. But you don't really want to be sitting there on the bike the whole time going, man, I wish this thing had more power. Man, I wish this thing was faster. You don't want to be sitting on the bike half the time thinking that. That's no fun. That's torture. That is torture, not entertainment. And that's the thing I think that 300 users will never understand, is that they are happy with that, where I would not be happy with that. And a lot of other riders would not be happy with that. Okay? Now, maybe they're happy with that and they think that everybody else should grow up or whatever and be happy with that. Okay? But at the same time, I don't think saving 75% on the cost of gas justifies riding a bike that's barely any faster than my car. I think that they should be growing up in that sense. I see guys riding motorcycles on the highway and riding in traffic. I think it's the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Why in the hell would you want to ride a motorcycle through all this traffic on all these roads, all this construction, all this, detritus on the roads and stuff? They're grooved. They're the stupid, shells that are low traction in the rain. Why would anyone want to ride a bike in that crap? It doesn't make any sense. Now, yeah, sure, if you're riding on city streets, stop and go traffic, every other, light you're catching, you're sitting there, it makes more sense than driving a car, and it makes more sense than walking or taking the subway. Yeah, then a motorcycle is great. As long as the weather's good, fine. As long as you can store it somewhere where you don't have to worry about getting ripped off, as long as you don't have to worry about getting someone pulling up next to you in the street and pointing a gun at you, which basically everyone has to worry about. Okay? So that's a push. As long as you have to worry about your clothes getting all messed up, or sweating, or what I had to do was when I rode a bike to work, I used to have to take a shower when I got there because I used to be so sweaty. It was even moderately sunny. I was sweaty by the time I got there. Yeah, it can make sense and it can be a good idea, but like I said, the farther I have to go, and as long as I can actually travel, well in my car, I'd much rather take my car than a bike. There's no question that it's fun to take a ride now and then on a bike. That's 5 or 6 hours, but it's not something I want to do regularly. Okay? A couple of times, sure, for the thrill, fine. Not every time. Not even most of the time. It's just too risky, and there are too many issues.